My name is Joy. Welcome to Red Pine Quilt Shop. We are going to show you the quick trim and circle ruler today. I showed you a little sneak peek of it last week, but we're going to show you it today. And this is by far one of my most used rulers. So this ruler is a ruler from Creative Grids, and it is a 3.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. And it is just a great basic ruler, great basic cutting ruler that I use a lot when I'm trimming fabric. Part of what I like about this ruler is that it's easy to pick up. I have smaller hands and I can easily pick this ruler up if I need to trim the edge of a block, if I need to cut some small pieces of fabric. I use it for a lot of my smaller piece cutting. It's a great size for that. But what makes this ruler really unique are the 45-degree lines that they have actually put on the top of it. You can see the black one here, and I'm going to actually slide my black foam core underneath the ruler so you can see the white lines. You've got a black one here, which now is hard to see on the black, but here are the white lines that are 45-degree lines that have been added to the ruler. So on top of all the standard half-inch, quarter-inch, 8-inch markings that any fabric ruler is going to have, it has these special 45-degree lines. And the key thing with those 45-degree lines is that they intersect a 1/4 inch from the edge of the ruler. So they intersect at the point where your seam allowance would be. And it is set up so you can use it right-handed or left-handed. Whatever side of the ruler you happen to have positioned, you can use, because there's one intersection point positioned on this side and one intersection point positioned on that side. And that black line, which I'm going to slide him off here a little bit so you guys can see him again, he is actually used for some of the cutting too, and it's also at a 45, but it is not set up to use the intersection point. And it's just used a little differently. So the key is that functionality though that has been added to do your 45-degree lines. It's a Creative Grids ruler. They always have a QR code on them. You can scan that QR code and you can pull up a video of the instructions on how to use the ruler, and that will come up anytime you scan that QR code. They also come with nice written instructions, and those come with the ruler, and you can also download a copy of those if you happen to lose them right from the Creative Grids website. Plus, it has the great grip on the back. So you've got that wonderful built-in sandpaper grip on the back side of this ruler, which helps to keep it from slipping when you're cutting. So I'm going to show you actually 4 different ways to use the ruler this morning. This ruler does so much that honestly that is not actually everything that you can use it for, but we're going to focus on those 4 things here this morning. What I showed last week with the ruler was using it actually for cutting half square triangles. And the thing that is amazing about this ruler is that you can use it to cut half square triangles, and there's no waste, and you don't have to waste any time marking lines. So what I have in front of me is actually a sample of what would frequently be used as a method to make half square triangles, and that is to cut squares. So you would cut a square, and then you would sew on the diagonal from point to point, and then you would cut, and you would waste this whole corner. So you would cut another square, sew on the diagonal, trim a 1/4 inch away from your line, and again you would waste that corner that you're constantly lopping off. And that's frequently how half square triangle construction will get written into patterns. This strip of fabric is a half width of fabric strip. I cut it off a fat 1/4, and you can see that with that square construction method I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 3.5 inch 3-inch finish, 3.5 inch cut half square triangles off of that strip of fabric. Now to cut with the quick trim, you are actually going to, I'm going to just shift a section here back down onto my mat, and if this was a strip, you're going to put your fabrics right sides together. If you're doing half square triangles, you want these ready to sew after you've cut. And the first cut you're going to make after you square up your end, you're going to look for this intersection point in the ruler. So there's my intersection point, and I'm going to line up with the side of the strip, and I'm going to line up with the top of the strip. So the side and the top, and I'll go ahead and cut. And I already have this cut, so I'm going to ease it away. So there's one cut. Now is when I'm going to use that special black line. So I'm going to line that black line up with the angle that was cut previously and with the base of the strip, and I'm going to cut again. And there's a second one off my strip set. And now I can just continue to do that, you know, working my way down the strip set, lining up the side, lining up the top, and go ahead and cut. And I can keep working my way down the strip set doing that. So right now, I'm going to show you how much fabric I have used. So I've cut 2 there, 2 there, 2 there. I just cut one more, so I now have 7 cut, and I still have fabric left over. So we've cut 6 there, and I've actually already cut 7, and I still have this whole chunk left over, and I've already cut more half square triangles. So that is one thing that this ruler does really well. You don't have to waste time marking those center lines, so it saves you all that time on marking. Now when you're working with a piece like this, you'll notice that one end has the dog ear trimmed off, one end doesn't, and that pointed end is actually the end that you want to feed into your sewing machine. So when you go to sew, you want to feed that pointed end in first, and then I'm normally going to use a stylus of some sort to hold the ends and keep them from shifting as I'm sewing that 1/4 inch seam. But that pointed end actually has a little more fabric there, and it's easier for your feed dogs to grab it. So you want to sew these pointed end into the machine first, and that will be the easiest way to sew them. So that is half square triangles with it. The other thing that you can do is you can also use it to cut flying geese the same way. Now with flying geese, you're still going to have that wasted corner. There isn't a way to do that no waste, unfortunately, but you will avoid having to take time to mark the pieces. So again, I'm going to look for that intersection point. I'm going to line it up with the side of my square. So I've taken my flying geese fabric, my main goose fabric, and my background fabric, and I've laid them out like I was ready to sew, but rather than marking that line on the diagonal, I'm just going to pre-trim it. So I will go ahead and line up that intersection point, line up with the side of the half square triangle, and line up with the top of the flying goose. So I'm lining up there, I'm lining up there, and what you'll notice is that dashed line, which is your seam allowance line, should be running right from corner to corner on my flying goose. So I'll go ahead and cut, get that corner off, and now I'm ready to take this to my sewing machine and sew. After I sew, I'll press, and then I'll do the same thing on the other end. And the nice thing is I'm trimming, which everybody has to trim at some point in time anyway. So the trimming step has to happen no matter what. But the nice thing is by trimming ahead of time, I don't have to take my 1/4 inch off my foot. I can leave, if I like to sew with that 1/4 inch guide foot, I can leave that on my machine, don't have to take it off, and I don't have to spend time again drawing lines. So I'm avoiding the line drawing step. Now you can do the same thing with this ruler anytime you're doing something where you have 45-degree angles. So maybe you were going to do a little snowball block with this big square. Maybe you were going to make it into a snowball block, something like that, and do snowballs all the way around it. You can do the same thing here, because again, your pattern is going to tell you to take that square and draw a line from corner to corner, lay it down in the corner and sew on the line, and then trim. And that is a lot of work. So again, I would pre-trim and avoid all the line drawing. So if I was going to do a snowball corner here, I would just go ahead and come in and pre-trim that, take it over, sew it from corner to corner, and then there you go is the start of my snowball block. And I've saved the time of doing the line drawing. So other thing that I really like about this ruler, and I'm going to come out on the white so you can see this, is you do have that dashed line at the 1/4 inch mark. So it basically is a dashed line that kind of is showing you where your seam allowance should be. So I tend to find that I use this ruler a lot as well. If I'm doing half square triangles and I'm doing them in a method where I'm making more than one at a time. So this particular half square triangle, I've actually sewn it a 1/4 inch from, you know, it's kind of hard to see those. I'm gonna move the fabric so you guys can see it because it's hard to see the seam line. So I've sewn it a 1/4 inch away from the center on both sides because I'm making 2 at a time half square triangles with this. And the nice thing with this ruler is that I'll use it to do my split because I have to cut that now on the center point, and it's really easy to take that dashed dotted line and line that dashed line up with my stitch line, and then boom, I'm ready to cut, and I can separate out my 2 half square triangles. So it's handy for that kind of cutting as well. The last thing that I'm going to show this morning is actually using it for binding strips. So I have a couple of full width of fabric strips cut like you would use for binding. The same thing would apply to sashing strips, narrow border strips. The ruler again is 12.5 by 3.5, so the widest that you can really cut with it is 3.5. Depending on how you're using it, you sometimes go a little bit wider, but 3.5 is kind of where it maxes out. So it's really designed for those narrow strips that you're going to join together end to end at a 45-degree angle. So perfect for that. So sashing strips, border strips, binding strips, all of those things. So I actually cut 2 2.5 inch binding strips to show you guys. Now, if I had a lot of binding strips or sashing strips that I needed to cut, I'm going to stack up as many as I can comfortably cut through. So for me, that's 3 or 4. And then once I get more than that, I always feel like it's too hard to cut and things are shifting on me. So 3 or 4 is usually my max. I just have 2. Now, when we did the flying geese and when we did the half square triangles, we were putting our fabric right sides together. So that when we cut those pieces, they were ready to go into the sewing machine. Now, for things that you're going to join end to end at a 45-degree angle, you want to stack all of those fabrics right side up. So not right sides together, all right sides up. So I have my 2 strips. I don't know if Nate can zoom in a little bit here, but I have my 2 strips and they are stacked right sides up. Still have the selvages on them. That's okay, we're going to trim that off. So the one thing that I like is the ruler actually has a straight white line right across the middle, and it is perfect to line up with the edge of your binding. So when you've got your stack of binding strips here, and lop off those selvages. And then all you need to actually do is to flip your ruler, and again, we're looking for one of those intersection points. So I cut this way, and all I need to do is rotate to the side, and I'm going to line that up with the side of my strip, and I'm going to line that up with the top of my strip. So that is going to line up with the side, and that is going to line up with the top, and I'll go ahead and trim. Now when I'm doing binding and sashing, I'm going to flip that stack, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other end, so that I can go to my sewing machine and I can just chain piece these all together. So I'll square up my end, and again I'll rotate, and I will take that corner off, and now I have 2 strips that are ready to sew. And I usually try to, when I'm sewing binding and sashing, I would try not to sew these 2 ends together, because every now and then there's a print where there's not directionality that you can easily see, but when you look at it closer, you realize there is. So usually when I'm sewing binding together, I would always try to sew the end of this strip to the other end. So I wouldn't sew the same two ends together. I would sew them this way. So I can take this stack and I can go to my sewing machine and see how those are formed and they're ready to go together. But I usually try to, like I said, not sew the same two ends together. Go to the other end of the fabric. And when I flip this, my dog ears are trimmed off of both ends. And all I have to do, did I have my hands there in the way, Nate? There we go. All I have to do is, again, no lines to mark, sew it with my 1/4 inch foot, whatever I normally use for my 1/4 inch, and I will have a perfectly joined piece of binding when I'm done. And you can just take that whole pile over to your machine and chain piece your way through the whole stack of binding and sashing strips that you have. So super, super good for that task as well. So the last thing that the ruler does is it actually is also a circle tool. And then you can really use it for 45-degree angles in other ways as well, such as cutting miters. We're going to do a deeper dive on those things at a later time, so this doesn't get too long. But you do have the ability to do circles with the ruler. A lot of people wonder what the holes are for, and that is what they are for. So I would flip it upside down if I was doing circles, so I'm not fighting that grip. And you can put a pin in one of the small holes and a marking pencil in one of the larger holes, and you can actually make circles in a very, very, very wide range of sizes with this ruler as well. And we're going to do a live later on and talk about how to do the circles with the ruler too. So that's what we have for you guys this morning. Have a wonderful rest of your week.